This story is titled, Confronted My Wife About Her Affair Partner. She laughed and said, Women can have the cake and eat it too now. So I served her cake. Hey everyone, I just wanted to share something real with you. The channel's been slowing down a bit recently, and honestly, I put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what I do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, when my wife and I first met, it felt like we were a team. She was confident, ambitious, and had a career in management. I was climbing my way up in coding, relying on my skills and experience instead of a formal degree. Our differences seemed complementary at first. She'd tease me about not having a degree, and I'd joke about her corporate jargon. It was harmless fun, or so I thought. When we got married, we were equals in most ways. Both debt-free, earning similar salaries, and sharing household expenses. Life was comfortable, and we spent our free time enjoying date nights, cooking together, or watching TV. We dreamed of starting a family someday, even setting up one of our spare bedrooms as a future nursery. Then the pandemic hit, and everything changed. Like many couples, we both started working from home. At first, it was manageable. We turned one of the spare rooms into her office while I kept using my existing setup. It felt temporary, so I didn't think much about how it might affect us. But as weeks turned into months, I started noticing subtle shifts. We approached working from home differently, almost oppositely. I'd get up early, make breakfast, shower, and even put on a suit to signal I was in work mode. My wife, on the other hand, rolled out of bed in sweatpants and jumped straight into her workday, often playing games on her iPad between emails. At first, it was just a difference in style. I thought, who cares how she works as long as she gets things done? Hot soul. The tension started small. She complained about me closing my office door during meetings, saying it made her feel excluded. I explained that I needed focus during my daily Scrum meetings, but she didn't seem to understand. She started making comments like, "Why are you hiding? We're in the same house all day anyway." It felt like a jab, but I brushed it off. The real strain came when I tried to keep up our routines outside of work. I'd suggest a movie night or cooking something new, and she'd wave it off, saying, "We see each other all day already. Why do we need more time together?" That hurt. We'd always been close, and now she seemed distant, like being in the same house was enough connection for her. Her office partially reopened a few months into the lockdown, and she jumped at the chance to go back. She was eager to be around her coworkers again, and I didn't blame her. I missed office life too, but my company stayed fully remote. She started going in 3 days a week, coming home later and later. At first, I assumed she was just adjusting to the new schedule. But soon, it became clear she wasn't just working late. She was staying out with coworkers for drinks or dinner. I asked her about it once, and her answer was vague. "Just the usual crowd," she said, avoiding eye contact. I felt uneasy, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. After all, we were both under a lot of stress, right? The distance between us grew. The warmth she used to show was gone, replaced by cold indifference. I started noticing things I'd ignored before, how she'd become secretive with her phone, stepping away to take calls or brushing off texts with just work stuff. She was quieter at home, more withdrawn, and any attempt I made to connect was met with disinterest or outright dismissal. By the time we hit our 5th wedding anniversary, we were like strangers. I told myself it was just a rough patch, something all couples go through. I didn't want to believe that the woman I'd built a life with was slipping away from me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It was a Saturday morning when everything unraveled. My wife handed me her old iPad and casually asked, "Can you wipe this for me? I'm giving it to my niece." It wasn't an unusual request. She often relied on me for tech-related things. I nodded, barely looking up from my coffee, and she left the house soon after, saying she had errands to run. I didn't think much of it. I set the iPad on my desk and planned to reset it later in the day. But as I picked it up to start the process, I noticed it was still logged into her messaging app. Out of habit, I glanced at the screen. That's when I saw the first message. It wasn't from me. It wasn't from anyone I recognized. And it wasn't innocent. At first, I thought I must be misunderstanding what I was seeing. But as I scrolled through the conversation, reality hit me like a truck. There were messages, photos, and videos exchanged between her and her boss. Explicit ones. They'd been having an affair for at least 2 months. I sat there in shock, my hands trembling as I kept scrolling. My brain couldn't process it all. The woman I'd shared my life with, the woman I trusted, had been lying to me. And not just a casual lie. This was calculated, intentional, and brazen. The texts were worse than I imagined. She talked about me, referring to me as boring and too predictable. She complained about my work-from-home routine, mocking the way I dressed up for meetings. One message burned into my memory. "He's so clueless," I could scream. "You're the only thing keeping me sane right now." That line hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought back to all the times I'd tried to bridge the gap between us. The nights I'd suggested we spend time together, the little surprises I'd planned to cheer her up, the patience I'd shown when she pulled away. It wasn't enough for her. Or maybe it was too much. Either way, she'd chosen someone else. After saving everything to a secure cloud drive, I shut the iPad and sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My heart was racing, my stomach churning. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or punch a hole in the wall. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, as the reality of her betrayal sank in. When she came home later that evening, I couldn't even look at her. She breezed through the door, tossed her keys on the counter, and greeted me like nothing had happened. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her tone casual and light. I mumbled something about work and went to my office, shutting the door behind me. My mind raced. Should I confront her? Should I demand an explanation? But every time I imagined the conversation, I felt a wave of nausea. Her lies had been so thorough, so bold. I didn't trust myself to stay calm. The next day, I called a lawyer. I'd never spoken to one before, but I knew I couldn't handle this alone. The lawyer listened patiently as I laid everything out, from the messages I'd found to the growing distance in our marriage. When I was finished, he asked me a simple question. "What do you want to do about this?" "I want a divorce," I said, the words coming out firmer than I expected. He didn't seem surprised. "If that's the case, you'll need more evidence. Courts are unpredictable, and the more proof you have, the better. I recommend hiring a private investigator to gather what we need." He explained that in our at-fault state, adultery could significantly impact the division of assets and alimony, but only if we could present a solid case. "You need to stay calm," he said. "Don't confront her yet. Let her think she's gotten away with it. The more comfortable she feels, the more careless she'll become." It sounded like good advice, but the thought of staying silent felt unbearable. Every time I saw her, every time she smiled at me or made small talk, it felt like another knife in my back. The private investigator worked quickly. Within a week, they had more evidence than I ever thought possible. Photos of her meeting her boss at his apartment, videos of them kissing in the parking lot after work, time-stamped screenshots of their messages. It was all there, laid out in excruciating detail. When the investigator handed me the final report, I felt both vindicated and devastated. There was no denying what she'd done, but seeing it all in black and white, every betrayal documented, was like reliving the pain all over again. By this point, I was barely functioning at home. I avoided her as much as possible, keeping conversations to a minimum and spending most of my time in my office. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her phone was always in her hand, her face lighting up at incoming messages I knew weren't from me. She stopped asking about my day, stopped making any effort to engage with me at all. One night, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "You think I don't know?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. She looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" I stood there, fists clenched. "I know, about you and your boss. I've seen the texts, the pictures, the videos. Don't bother lying." For a moment, she just stared at me, her face a mix of shock and something else, defiance. "And?" she finally said, crossing her arms. "What are you going to do about it?" Her tone, her smugness, it set me off. "What am I going to do? I'm divorcing you. That's what I'm going to do." She smirked, shaking her head. "Oh, please, you won't leave me? Even if you try, I'll get half of everything. You might as well stay. It's better for both of us." Her words, her arrogance, her complete lack of remorse, it was like a switch flipped in my brain. "You think this is a marriage?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that made my blood boil. "Honey, this is the 21st century. A woman can have her cake and eat it too." That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to make sure she felt the full weight of what she'd done. After that night, everything changed. The woman I'd married, who I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone cold and indifferent. Her laughter, the smugness, and those final words, "A woman can have her cake and eat it too," echoed in my head for days. I couldn't stop replaying the moment, feeling the anger boil just under the surface. My lawyer had already told me to keep my emotions in check. "The courts don't favor theatrics," he warned. "Judges care about fairness and professionalism. Any emotional stunts could come back to bite you. I nodded and said I'd keep things civil, but deep down, I wanted her to feel some of the humiliation she'd caused me. That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted to talk about having her cake and eating it too, I'd make sure she remembered those words for the rest of her life. I started looking for a bakery that could handle custom cakes. After some searching, I found one that offered edible image printing. You could upload any photo, and they'd recreate it in frosting. It was perfect. I went through the evidence I'd gathered, picking a photo that wasn't too explicit, but would still make the message crystal clear. It showed her and her boss in a compromising position, clothed but unmistakable. Above the image, I had the words piped in bold, decorative icing. "Here's your cake. Eat it too." The bakery didn't ask any questions, and I didn't volunteer any details. When I picked up the cake, I couldn't help but smile. It was ridiculous and petty, but in that moment, it felt like justice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I coordinated with the process server to have the cake and divorce papers delivered to her office. He was an older guy, the kind who'd probably seen it all, but when I told him the plan, he laughed out loud. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said. "This is going to be a story for the books." The next day, I waited anxiously for his update. When the call came, I answered immediately. "You won't believe the scene," he said, barely able to contain his laughter. I walked into her office during lunch, cake in hand, and asked for her by name. She was sitting with a group of coworkers, laughing and chatting like nothing was wrong. She confirmed her name, so I set the box on the table, opened it, and put the papers next to it. Then I said, "You've been served." "What happened next?" I asked, leaning forward in my chair. She froze at first, just staring at the cake. Then she went pale. One of her coworkers leaned over to look and gasped, "Oh my God!" That's when she completely lost it, screaming, swatting the cake off the table, but it landed face up on the carpet. Everyone saw it. A few people started laughing, and others just walked out. Her boss bolted out of the room without a word. I could picture it in my head. The chaos, the embarrassment, the reality of her actions crashing down on her. It wasn't just satisfying, it was cathartic. The aftermath was immediate. My phone started blowing up within minutes of the cake delivery. Texts, voicemails, missed calls. It was nonstop. At first, I ignored it, letting the notifications pile up. Then her mom texted me. "She's staying with me for now. Please don't contact her unless it's urgent." I laughed at the irony. She was acting like I was the one harassing her. Meanwhile, I hadn't even responded to a single message. That night, I sat in my office, reflecting on what I'd done. The initial rush of satisfaction was fading, replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. My lawyer's warnings echoed in my mind. Judges don't have a sense of humor. Any act of pettiness could hurt your case. Had I gone too far? Would this stunt come back to haunt me in court? I didn't regret the message, but I worried about how it might be perceived. As much as I wanted to see her humiliated, my ultimate goal was to protect myself in the divorce. The last thing I needed was to jeopardize my position because of a cake. The next day, I called my lawyer to come clean. He sighed when I told him what I'd done. "Michael, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Judges don't like these kinds of antics. It could make you look vindictive." "I wasn't trying to be vindictive," I said defensively. "I just wanted to make a point." "I get it," he replied. "And honestly, it's not the worst thing I've seen. But from now on, you need to focus on the big picture. Leave the drama out of it." I agreed, though part of me still felt like the cake had been worth it. The aftermath of the cake stunt was immediate and far-reaching. By the next day, the story of her public humiliation had spread through her office like wildfire. Mutual friends began texting me, asking if the rumors were true. I didn't reply to most of them, but from the details they shared, I pieced together the scene that had unfolded. Apparently, several coworkers had filmed the cake reveal, and videos were circulating among staff. Her boss, the man she'd cheated with, had immediately distanced himself, refusing to speak to her outside of strictly work-related matters. HR had been alerted, though it seemed like no formal complaints had been filed yet. Meanwhile, her so-called friends at work, the ones who had encouraged the affair, turned on her in an instant. "She brought this mess into the office," one of them allegedly said. "She deserves whatever fallout she gets." The irony of it all was almost poetic. The same people who had egged her on were now scapegoating her to protect themselves. She was left alone, ostracized, and panicking. At home, things were quieter. She hadn't come back since the cake delivery, opting to stay with her mom instead. That suited me just fine. My lawyer had advised me not to engage with her directly, so I ignored her texts and calls. Most of them alternated between begging for forgiveness and accusing me of ruining her life. I forwarded everything to my lawyer without replying. I'll admit, a small part of me felt guilty. Not for exposing her lies, she deserved that, but for the sheer public nature of it all. It wasn't just our marriage that had fallen apart. Her professional life and social reputation were now in shambles. But every time I started to second-guess myself, I remembered her laughing in my face, telling me I'd never leave her. That memory was enough to quiet any lingering doubts. A week later, she emailed me, asking to come by the house to talk. My lawyer advised me to allow it, but only under strict conditions. Record everything, he said, and have witnesses present. You don't want her twisting the narrative later. I agreed, and 2 mutual friends came over to act as witnesses. We set up our phones to record the conversation and waited for her to arrive. When she walked in, she looked completely different, frazzled, anxious, and far from the confident, smug person I'd confronted weeks earlier. She sat at the kitchen table, avoiding eye contact. I just want to explain, she began, her voice shaky. I don't know what came over me. It's like, it wasn't even me doing those things. I wasn't in control. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You were in control enough to lie to me for months. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might actually take responsibility. But then, she shifted the blame. It wasn't just me, she said. My co-workers. They got into my head. They kept telling me I deserved more, that you were holding me back. I raised an eyebrow. Holding you back how? By trusting you? Supporting you? Providing a home? She flinched at my tone but pressed on. They said you weren't ambitious enough, that I needed someone who could challenge me intellectually. They made me feel like I was missing out. Her excuses made my blood boil. So what? You cheated because a bunch of office gossips psychoanalyzed me behind my back? She looked down at her hands. I'm not saying it's an excuse, I don't know why I let them influence me. Then came the real bombshell. She admitted that the same co-workers, whom she now called the 3 witches, had turned on her after the cake incident. Not only had they cut ties with her, but they'd also started blackmailing her. They were demanding $5,000 to stay silent, threatening to go to HR with all the sordid details of her affair if she didn't pay up. I don't have that kind of money, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sold my car to cover my legal fees, and I'm barely scraping by. Please, I need your help. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. You want me to help you? After everything you've done? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't know where else to turn. I don't want to lose my job on top of everything else. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the texts, the lies, and the laughter. I shook my head. There's no going back to normal after this. You need to deal with the consequences of your choices. What should I do? She asked, looking desperate. Report yourself, I said bluntly. Report your boss and your coworkers too. If you give in now, they'll just keep coming back for more. At least if you go to HR first, you can control the narrative. She hesitated, clearly torn between self-preservation and fear. But what if they fire me? Then that's on you, I said coldly. You made this mess. You can't expect me to clean it up for you. Before she left, she asked one last question. What about us? Is there any chance we can fix this? I didn't even hesitate. There is no us. It's over. Get yourself a lawyer and prepare for the divorce. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she just nodded and walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind her was like the final nail in the coffin. In the days that followed, I heard bits and pieces about her situation. She hadn't reported herself to HR, and from what mutual friends told me, the blackmail demands were escalating. Her life was spiraling out of control, but I kept my distance. I'd already spent too much time and energy on her. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I just wanted to move on. When the divorce proceedings officially began, I felt a mix of relief and dread. On one hand, I was finally taking steps to free myself from her betrayal. On the other, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Divorce is messy, even under the best circumstances, and ours was far from amicable. My lawyer had been preparing for weeks, gathering evidence and documenting everything we could. The affair, the messages, the photos, it was all lined up and ready to present. He reminded me that we were in an at-fault state, which meant her infidelity would play a significant role in determining the division of assets and any alimony claims. Stay calm, he told me before our first court appearance. The evidence speaks for itself. Let her be the one who looks unreasonable. The first hearing focused on temporary orders, how bills and responsibilities would be handled during the divorce process. Her lawyer came out swinging, trying to paint her as a victim. He claimed that the affair was an emotional response to neglect, and that I had withdrawn emotionally and physically long before she cheated. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I kept my face neutral. My lawyer calmly countered, presenting the evidence of her affair and highlighting the timeline. The messages and photos showed that she had been the one withdrawing, lying, and sneaking around for months. The judge seemed unimpressed by her lawyer's arguments and ruled in my favor. I retained control of the house, our shared accounts, and all major financial decisions until the final ruling. After that, things started to unravel for her. She had already sold her car to cover her legal fees, and mutual friends told me she was borrowing money from her parents to make ends meet. The blackmail from her former co-workers hadn't stopped either, and she was visibly struggling to keep her life together. Despite all of this, she kept trying to contact me. Emails, voicemails, and even handwritten letters showed up almost daily. One email stood out, not because it was different, but because it perfectly encapsulated her mindset. "You're ruining my life," she wrote. "How can you just throw everything away like this? We could fix this if you would just stop being so stubborn." It was almost laughable. She still couldn't see that she had done this to herself. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and didn't respond. I wasn't interested in playing her games anymore. The second hearing was where things got more heated. Her lawyer pushed hard for alimony, arguing that her reputation at work had been unfairly damaged and that she deserved financial support to get back on her feet. It was a bold move, considering the evidence of her affair was the reason for her damaged reputation. My lawyer didn't even need to rebut it in detail. The judge dismissed the claim outright, stating that her actions had directly contributed to her situation. The court also reviewed the division of assets. My lawyer made a compelling case for why I should retain full ownership of the house and the majority of our shared savings. He emphasized that I had been the primary financial contributor for years, and that her infidelity had irreparably damaged the marriage. Her lawyer tried to argue for a 50-50 split, but the judge wasn't having it. The final ruling left her with little more than her personal belongings and a small portion of our savings. I kept the house, the car, and the bulk of our assets. She looked completely defeated when the judge announced the decision. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but then I remembered all the lies, the laughter, and the arrogance, and that pity quickly faded. Outside of court, she tried one last Hail Mary. She emailed me, suggesting that we attend marriage counseling to rebuild what we had. My lawyer advised me to entertain the idea, not because I was obligated to reconcile, but because it would make me look reasonable in the judge's eyes. "Judges like to see that you're willing to compromise, even if it's just on paper," he explained. The counseling session was held over Zoom. She was at her mom's house, and I was in my home office. The counselor spent most of the time trying to assign blame equally, saying things like, "It takes two to create distance in a marriage," and "Both of you need to take responsibility for what went wrong." I refused to engage with the narrative. "I don't agree," I said simply. "This wasn't a mutual breakdown. She made a choice, and that choice destroyed our marriage." The counselor seemed frustrated but didn't push further. At the end of the session, my wife asked if I'd agree to another meeting. "What would it take for us to try again?" she pleaded. I didn't hesitate. "Nothing. There's no going back." I logged off before she could respond. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The court's decision had given me almost everything. My house, my savings, and most importantly, my freedom. She walked away with barely enough to start over, but that wasn't my concern anymore. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Final update. It's been a few months since the divorce was finalized, and I thought I'd finally moved past everything. I rebuilt my life, got my house back in order, and even started finding peace with what happened. But life has a way of circling back to unfinished business. This time, it wasn't about me, it was about her. A mutual friend reached out a few weeks ago with some news about my ex-wife. Apparently, things at her job had taken a turn for the worse. After the cake stunt and the fallout that followed, her office became a minefield of tension. The rumor mill churned nonstop, and her reputation was shot. HR finally stepped in when someone anonymously sent in evidence of her affair with her boss. Photos, messages, everything. I had a pretty good guess who that anonymous person was. She wasn't fired immediately, but they put her under investigation, which effectively destroyed her standing in the company. Her boss, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. HR had no patience for someone in his position abusing power and engaging in an affair with a subordinate. He was terminated within a week of the investigation starting, with security escorting him out of the building in front of everyone. Her three witches friends, those co-workers who had encouraged the affair, didn't stick around to support her. They turned on her completely, throwing her under the bus in their HR interviews to save their own skins. My ex-wife became a pariah in the office, and within a month, she was let go too. That's not the end of it, though. A week after I heard about the investigation, I got an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "We need to talk about your ex-wife and my husband." Turns out her boss's wife had found out about the affair, and she was furious. Someone at his company tipped her off after the investigation started, and she'd been digging for information ever since. When she finally reached me, she was polite but direct, asking if I had any evidence I could share. At first, I hesitated. Getting involved in someone else's divorce felt messy, but then I thought about everything he and my ex had put me through. He had helped ruin my marriage, and now his wife wanted to take him down. It only felt fair to give her the tools to do it. I forwarded her everything, the photos, the texts, the videos. She thanked me profusely and promised she'd put it to good use. "He's going to regret every second of this," she said. From what I've heard since, she didn't hold back. She filed for divorce almost immediately, and with the evidence I provided, she absolutely destroyed him in court. He lost custody of their kids, had to sell their house to cover the settlement, and was ordered to pay substantial alimony. The cherry on top? His reputation was completely trashed in their social circle. Turns out his wife wasn't shy about sharing the details of his betrayal with anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, my ex-wife hasn't fared much better. After losing her job, she tried to find work in the same field, but the gossip followed her wherever she went. No one wanted to hire someone with that kind of baggage. Last I heard, she was working part-time at a local retail store and living in a cramped apartment. Her parents have reportedly grown tired of bailing her out financially. They've started distancing themselves, which leaves her even more isolated. Mutual friends say she looks miserable, like the weight of everything she's done is finally hitting her. As for the boss, he's struggling too. With no job, a ruined reputation, and an expensive divorce settlement, he's barely keeping his head above water. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel some satisfaction hearing about his downfall. He thought he could have it all, just like my ex-wife, and now he's paying the price. This whole situation has been a reminder that actions have consequences. For months, I questioned whether I'd done the right thing with the cake stunt, whether exposing her so publicly had been worth it. But seeing how everything played out, I have no regrets. She and her boss tried to tear apart 2 marriages, and now they're dealing with the wreckage they created.